Welcome, Quinn. We are so excited to have you on the Work Redefined podcast, season 2, talking all about faith and how we're building that into our lifestyles. And Quinn, why don't you just start by telling us a little bit more about yourself, like what you're working on right now? And like how's life?
Well, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm so excited to be here. A little bit about myself. So I'm a junior at Concordia College studying political science and minoring in business. I'm currently helping my dad with his run for attorney general right now. So just kind of stepping into that a little bit and getting myself familiar with all stuff political. I've always said that I love politics. So this is really giving me a front seat to it all. So I'm super excited about that. And other than that, life is good. It's starting to warm up outside. So
life is really good. Yeah. Honestly, like it just changes everything when it's just a little bit warmer out. So I think we're all in such a much better mood now. But I love it.
Oh my gosh. I know.
We're excited. We're really excited to have you. And like I kind of mentioned, when it comes to faith, and we talk a lot about faith in the workplace, but I know you kind of have a lot of stuff going on right now, and just with like school and helping your dad, and there's a lot of commitments. I know we all have, and your commitments might look different than a lot of other people's commitments. So I would love for you kind of just like, let's just dive in and just talk a little bit about like how you're doing it all. But also, I know that your faith is like very important to you. And so how are you doing that with faith, like at the front of everything?
Yeah, no, I think just listing out, my priorities, it goes faith, family, friends, like in that order. And when you make all these commitments and you want to be in all this stuff, it can get a little overwhelming, and I'm not perfect at balancing it whatsoever. But I feel like this year especially has kind of taught me that I need to kind of find that balance. And I need to be able to put myself first in certain situations when I just need a little bit of time to myself for a little bit of downtime. But really focusing on my relationship with God is so important because, he's got this plan for our lives, and we may think that we have it all figured out. And I know we talked a little bit about this when we got coffee a couple of weeks too. Like I'm such a control person. I like to have a plan. I like to have it all set in stone, ready to go. But that's been the biggest thing for me, is like the biggest lesson is I can't plan everything. I don't know all the answers, all this stuff. So really just being in touch with God and with faith has helped me to just kind of understand that like not everything is going to go in this perfect order that we think it is. But just finding that balance and praying about finding that balance. And something too that I've really learned over the course of this year is to understand people and to understand situations. We have to first understand the creator of all humankind and of everything in order to really understand those relationships. And that's just something that's really helped me. And I feel a lot of peace too when I put God first, and I can feel it too in my life. My stress levels go up. Everything kind of gets shifted in not a great way when I'm not putting my faith first. And I have to take a step back and just kind of reevaluate my priorities and just, again, take that alone time, recharge, and just refocus is huge.
No, I love what you said. And we did talk a lot about how, and I think women especially, and maybe I shouldn't say that. I don't know. Like, I think maybe more in like the business world, and like we find that we need to have control, like you said, over everything. And I think that is a huge barrier that a lot of us have, is like the feeling that we need to control every aspect of our life. And I think culture right now is really shaping us to be it's like our rights and like we are in control of everything, but in reality it's not us. So I don't know, maybe talk a little bit more about like how you kind of figured out this whole control piece, and like what tips you have to like let it go, because we all are working on just like letting it go and giving it to God. Like how are you doing that?
Yeah. So I actually had a conversation about this with my dad a little while ago. We were talking about just stress and all this stuff. And I was just talking to him, and he said, a simple prayer that he's been saying is like, God, I need your peace. Super simple, super to the point, but it's so important because it's like, we do get so wrapped up in what society wants us to be and how we think we need to perform in this world. And So just saying that simple prayer, like, God, I need your peace. I need a little bit of relaxation. Help me to refocus on what's important. Because we put so much pressure on ourselves, and it's good to be competitive, and it's good to have goals, and it's good to, have that drive and that want to do great things. But we also need to remind ourselves that rest is so important. Rest is so important. And I'm preaching to myself when I say that, because I'm terrible. I'm terrible about rest. I think we live in a world where being busy is attractive. We're not taking that time for ourselves, for our relationships. And we are built for connection. Like, God created us for connection. And so really just finding your people and praying about that. And you have your people in the workplace, you have your people who, you go out, have fun with, dinner, like all that kind of stuff. You got different groups for different purposes. But really just praying about that and asking God to place the right people in your life, and also for you to be a blessing to them. So, and so, cause maybe you're that person for somebody else. But yeah, I think it's so important to refocus, and I keep saying that, but it is. And that's something that I'm still learning, again, going back to that balance and trying to find it, and really just praying on that and praying for that peace to understand that, really nothing that I'm doing is life and death. So it is okay to take rest days, to just relax, focus, and refuel my mind through that rest.
Okay, you said two things that I'm like, oh yes. So the first is like how you said you were talking about relationships a little bit, and how we need different friends for different types of things, or people are in your lives for different types of things. And I think this is something that, like, I personally have a hard time with, because I feel like I need to have this core group, and these are the friends that I want to be able to do everything with. And obviously, like, that's not really how it works. But I think I was talking to somebody about the fact that we need to, like, ask God to bring people into our lives. And so I think it's super important to have, like, people in your life for different things. I don't know, maybe talk more about that, like what you've seen, and like how, because it's hard. You have to transition, and like people don't stay in your life forever. And so how have you kind of navigated that? Obviously, like, you're in college right now, but even the transition from high school to college, and then you're also into the workforce too, and like that whole thing, how are you, like, choosing the people you spend your time with, and like finding those people?
Yeah. So I remember I was part of this Bible study in high school, and it was just a really large group of girls, and it was great. They were some girls that I went to school with, some girls who were just from the community. So it was a nice balance between that. And we had talked a lot about relationships, and how sometimes, you've got these lifelong people, but sometimes you're meant to just be friends with somebody, or have somebody in your life for a specific reason, whether it's for you to bless them, or vice versa, or both ways. And so it's okay to understand that, like, there are seasons of relationships and seasons of friendships. And something that I love to do, and I tell people this all the time, I love to journal. I journal like how I'm feeling, like what stage of life I'm in, like my goals, all that kind of stuff. And through journaling, I've kind of realized, like, okay, this friend was maybe for this season, and they helped me this way, and we had this great friendship, or whatever it might be. But then we moved on to a new season, like going to college or moving, all those different things. But yeah, no, I think it's just, there are people who are going to be with you lifelong, but there's also people who, it's just a season, and it doesn't make you a bad friend. It doesn't make them a bad friend or person. It just means that you were created for that season together. But yeah, no, so I think we do put a lot of pressure on ourselves. At least I remember when I first came to college, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to meet my best friends in college right now. So you have that first semester of like really close friends that you're like, these are my forever. I found them. These are my best friends.
Yeah.
And some of them are still my closest friends, but some of them, we just shifted groups, and still no falling out, like anything like that. But it comes naturally, and God places people in your life to teach you something, or to be there through something, or to whatever it might be. The purpose is different for everybody and for every situation, but genuine relationships, they're not going to be forced. They're going to happen. And whether that's a
Well,
romantic relationship or a friendship
mhm,
or a family relationship, whatever it might be. There's different
mhm,
seasons. It's just trusting God through
mhm,
those different seasons.
mhm. Well, I think it's interesting the perspective on seasons of friendships and relationships, because you often hear seasons of life being like, oh, I'm in this season and this is like, they whatever, they say the seasons of your life, but it's
Yeah.
interesting to think of it as friendships and relationships, because what you said earlier, you said to understand people and situations, we need to understand the creator of all. And you said that, and I thought that's very interesting, because it's okay that like friendships and stuff don't last, or some people need to get out of your life, but or just changes, like the seasons change, right? Exactly what you're saying. But I think it's interesting to knowing that we aren't going to really know when it's that time, probably, without the assistance of God and without like understanding him. We might not be able to understand that situation or the people that maybe are in our life for a certain reason. So I think like understanding what God would do, and in that situation, that maybe is like the key. I mean, right now it's like, what would God do in this situation? What would God say about my friendships? Yeah, I don't know if that resonates with you.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
going with that,
totally.
but
Totally. No, but honestly, like to understand even ourselves, like if we're going to seek to understand ourselves and the people around us, well, you have to go to the creator because we're so complex and we don't even understand ourselves at some points. It's like, if we seek to understand, like, finding our identity in Christ, who does God say that I am? Not what does society tell me that I am or tell me that I should be. And that's really hard too, to kind of separate. Like, you hear people put labels on people all the time, whether it's good, like, oh, you're a leader, oh, you're this, or maybe it's bad, like, oh, you're a troublemaker, oh, we label one another so much throughout this world. And it's like, that's not where our label comes from. That's not where our identity comes from. It comes from God. And so really digging into the word and saying, who does God say that I am? And trusting in that. And the Bible obviously doesn't say, and Quinn is this, and Quinn is gonna, but it's understanding, like, who am I, through reading these verses and then praying on it and giving God the space to speak to you, because I'm like not patient. And so, and it's funny because the sermon this week was about patience. And so, just yesterday actually. And so I was like, I needed to hear that, because part of being patient is saying, okay, I'm going to shut my mind off. I'm going to just allow God to come in. I'm not, because we can't micromanage when God decides to speak to us or how he decides to speak to us. And so just waiting to hear his voice and trying to find our identity through him.
And I think it also, when it comes to, the workplace or anything like that, when the conversations we're having, and you said that something about like labeling one another, and I think like that can happen a lot in the workplace, just but even when it comes to like roles, we're all labeled by like our role, like this is what my position is, but like truly, like we're so much more than just that. And I think bringing like, who does God say I am in the workplace? Like, we are still children of God. We are still all of these things, but like, how can we also bring that into our relationships, but also know like relationships can change in the workplace and things can change. So like, who does God say we are at work too? You know what I mean? Like, it's not just because, yeah, just the whole labels thing, like that was such a good point, just to like, we all are labeled as this is who I am. Because when you introduce yourself, I always thought things are so interesting. When you introduce yourself, you're always like, and I just I'm like, hi, my name is Grace Lang. I work for the Burnout Prevention Project. I'm blah, 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 blah. It's never like, hey, I'm Grace Lang and I am a child of God and this is this, like, wouldn't that be so interesting?
Yeah. And that's the most important label that we'll ever have, is child of God. But no, we don't say, like, you never say that in an introduction. People will be like, oh, okay.
Right.
But we each have gifts and talents. And that's part of like finding your identity through Christ, is like, what are the gifts that God's given me? How can I use them in the world? And how can I use them to better a situation, whether that be at work or home or whatever it might be? And so again, just going back to praying on that and asking God to kind of show you, like, what have you blessed me with, God? Like, what have you given me that I can use to help the world become better and help myself just build these genuine relationships and to be labeled in the correct way, I guess you could say.
Yes, exactly. Label in the correct. I know. I think we maybe should, next time someone asks us who we are, we should say that. Be like, you know what? Let's do it. Okay, we'll check back next time we do it and see what people say.
That'll be our challenge. That's our challenge.
Everyone listening right now, that's your challenge. Next time someone you introduce yourself, say your first name, last name, and that you're a child of God, and that's like what your identity is. Exactly. And then let us know what you think. What happens?
No, that's so great. But yeah, we don't even think about that when we introduce ourselves whatsoever. We're like so quick to say, this is where I work, this is where I go to school, this is what I'm studying. It's like, that may be like your identity, but that changes too. But something that will forever be is that you are forever a child of God.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. Well, I guess when it comes to, so I know you know on this podcast, and what we do is we talk all about burnout, okay? Right? And so burnout is, you're either moving towards burnout or away from burnout. And I know we've all experienced it in such like some different ways in everything that we do, but I mean, we're kind of on the topic of relationships. So let's like keep going with that, because I think that's like super needed right now. Obviously, in like the world of relationships are completely changing, and the way we are is like virtual, and like people are like, I don't know, I think like relationships in general are just changing. So I guess what are you seeing, or like what have you seen in yourself, like in terms of burnout, and like how has it affected like your relationships?
Oof. Okay, I'm super extroverted. I love people. I do. I love talking to people. I love being in groups, but I am also such an introvert. I refuel by having time to myself. And so, and I think it's just realizing that I can't be around people 24/7. Otherwise I will literally go crazy. And so respecting myself enough and respecting my boundaries enough to understand that if I want to be the best that I can be to the people around me, for them and for myself, I need to take that time to myself to refuel, and I need to focus on me. And, you know, some people view that as selfish, but you have to be able to pour into yourself before you can pour into other people.
Yeah, I think we may probably have talked about this on this podcast before, but we always say the most loving thing you can do for everyone around you is to take care of yourself, because in order to love, you have to take care of yourself and love yourself too. And like, I think kind of comes back to the whole rest thing. And I think it can be kind of hard. We're really taught, like as you said at the beginning, how we're in this culture where we're just like, it's the grind culture, kind of like we're just doing things. But it's like, at what point is it okay to completely stop and just rest? Like, at what point is that like fine, you know? And because I think we struggle with that, because it's like you said, it can kind of, like you even said, like it might seem like selfish, but it shouldn't. It's like, why are we letting it seem selfish, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess like it's always like the whole concept of like, what does God say about rest? Like, when is it actually okay to just be done?
Yeah. Oh no, that's kind of a loaded question, but it's a good question, because rest is so important, but we also, going back to like, we live in a very competitive society. So we're constantly comparing. It's like, well, their schedule is more busy than mine and they're doing fine. So how am I burnt out already? Like, I can't be burnt out. I have to keep working. Or how are they burnt out? I'm way more busy. Like, there's that constant comparison. And so
yes,
again, it's going back to like, okay, here's who I am. This is where I'm at. Like, focusing on where you're at, and then it's so hard. And like, I'm not good at this either. So I'm saying this, but I'm also like, Quinn, remember this, but comparing ourselves to like who we were yesterday, how can we get better? And like, better also means like taking rest, you know? And so, and taking time to reset and to just look back and be able to, like I mentioned that I love journaling. Sometimes that, for me, that's just taking time to sit down and journal and just look at like, okay, these are my blessings. This is what I'm feeling really grateful for. This is what's going really, really well. this is also like what's kind of sucks right now in life.
Mhm.
Like, how can I deal with all these different emotions, and like, where am I meeting ourselves where we're at, and just asking God to come into that space too, of course. But we live in such a competitive world where we are constantly comparing ourselves to one another.
Mhm.
And that can get tiresome, very
Mhm.
tiresome, very quick. And so, and my mom has always said too, like, comparison is the thief of joy.
Mhm.
And it's so true, because we spend so much time looking at how busy other people are, or how um not busy other people are, and comparing like our lives and our workload to
Mhm.
theirs. And so, and like oftentimes I'll look at my workload and I'll be like, well, I'm only a student. Like, how am I this burnt out? Like, okay, but on top of being a student, you're doing all these extra things. You're in these
Mhm.
different clubs. You're trying to balance out a social life with your friends. Like, but also life doesn't get any easier. So it's like, okay, what can I do now? What lessons can I learn now that will take me far into the future, especially after college, when I'm in the workforce and I'm
Mhm.
working a full-time job, or in the way future, if I'm a mom, like, how do you balance out these different things? And so it's learning that about ourselves now, and just trying to figure out our own path
Mhm.
and compare to other people.
Well, and I think the whole, I feel like we always think like we always talk about, we're always comparing, but I think like the whole competitive aspect of it, you just like do like the way that to frame that, to think like it is like, is comparison coming out of competitiveness, or is it the other way around? You know what I mean? Like there is such, we are in such a competitive society, and I was just looking for it, but we did a LinkedIn poll a couple of weeks ago, and I asked, what is the number one thing you're struggling with as a high achieving woman? And comparison was the top one.
That's
And I
crazy.
just think, like, yeah, like where is this coming from?
Mhm.
And why are we allowing ourselves, and it's, I think a lot of times too, we compare ourselves with the people we love the most.
Oh, so true.
And it's like, even like your family, like you go to, and I think this is the hardest. And I actually don't think it ever gets easier. I was just gonna say, I think it's harder when you're younger, but I actually don't think so, because at each stage of your life, there's such a different way, like you're comparing yourself. But even, yeah, you go to a family gathering and your whatever sister-in-law is doing XYZ, and
Yeah.
you're like, well, okay, and like you said, yeah, I'm not, I don't have as much going on. Like, why am I so tired? Or like, why am I letting myself do this if she's doing this? And it's like every single day, like I think it all does come back to gratitude. Like if we were just to like sit and say, oh my gosh, like I'm so thankful for the things that I do have in my life,
Mhm.
rather than thinking about the things that like this other person has, or like why is their life look different? It might even be better, but why does it
Yeah.
look different
Yeah.
than mine? I don't know. I just think that's so interesting. The competitive society is like that's like a huge thing. But
But
yeah.
then it's like finding that balance of like, okay, but I also want to surround myself with people who are going to push me to be the best version of me. And
Yes,
I
it's like
want to push them.
where is
But
that
it's
balance? But yeah,
exactly.
that's such a good point.
I
Oh.
love the Bible verse, so I wanted to look this up so I could find, but it's like, um, it talks about like love is not boastful. And this is from
Mhm.
1 Corinthians 13, but
Mhm.
like love is not boastful, love does not envy, like all that kind of stuff. Like love lifts one another up, we support one another, we're patient, we're kind,
Mhm.
we're slow to anger, all those kinds of things. And
Mhm.
that, I went and spoke to a Bible study back in Bismarck this summer actually, and
Mhm.
I was talking about this verse, and so often we talk about it and it's like, this is how you love other people, this is how you love your spouse or whatever it might be. But it's like, okay, but you also have to love yourself that way. Like, I have to be patient with
Mhm.
myself, I have to have grace for myself, I have to not get super angry at myself, but have standards obviously and goals, but
Mhm.
have that patience and that grace for ourselves in this world is
Mhm.
so important. But really just trying to love more like God, and that means pushing people to be the best that they can be, but
Mhm.
without the negative competitive nature.
Mhm. Yeah, that just goes on, like, what if we were to strive every day to be the most loving or the most joyful, rather than striving to be, the most successful or the most whatever it is, most well known? Like, what if we just like was strive? We're just, and it's like maybe people think, I don't know if we think that's too simple, just like be loved. I don't know, like, but it's actually like, that's probably so much harder than like being successful. Like to truly be a loving person every single day might even be more difficult than trying to like be the most successful person. And like, if you're up for a challenge, if you're trying to like challenge yourself and better yourself, like, why don't we try to just be more loving to everybody? And like, even like at work, at home, like, instead of like thinking of that person and thinking about, oh, they have something I don't, think of like, wow, they're so loved, but I am too.
Yeah.
And like, I want to be patient with them, but I also need to be patient with myself, and like, I don't want to brag because, all these things. Like, what if we just tried something different?
Yeah, 100%. And it sounds so simple. And it
Right,
is.
yeah.
It really is. It's such a simple thing. Like love more and love more like God. So simple, but we make it so complex because we've also got that human nature within us to be envious of other people or to compare in a negative way. And so, yeah, but it is simple, and it's trying to simplify it for ourselves to follow that rule and to treat others the way that we want to be treated, but also like treat ourselves with the respect that we know that we deserve, and having that self-respect and that love for ourselves so that we can pour that love into other people.
Yeah. And like, we say it's so simple, and I think it seems like, I think sometimes we take that and make it harder than it needs to be. Because really, like, truly just like loving everything around you and loving everyone around you is like just like letting go of all, it's like letting go of everything that's holding us back, and like just like to just like be free. And I think like love like makes you like, it just like frees you of like so much pain and so much heartache, because when you're holding like your love back, it almost is so much like harder to, I don't know. Yeah. I love what you said. Love more and love more like God. That's what we need to do. Love more like God. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Well, okay. And so I wanted to ask you, I know you said like 1 Corinthians 13 was the verse that you just pulled that from, but do you have any other favorite Bible verse or like anything that you want to share, and like why?
Yeah. So my favorite Bible verse for honestly, as long as I can remember, is Psalms 46:5. And it's super simple, but it just says, God is within her, she will not fail. And I think, the world has this definition of what failure is, but to me, it's like nothing can defeat me on earth because I have God with me. And like the ultimate goal is to not please man, but to please the Lord. And so just walking through each day, understanding that just because this is also something that, we think too, is that, okay, if I have God in my life, like I will not have any struggles. I will be completely fine. And it's like, no, you will. We live in an imperfect world, but if you have God in your heart and you have accepted him as your Lord and Savior, like you can make it through hard things because you know that there's something greater than ourselves that we're worshiping or praying to or asking for guidance. And so it's like, some days are super great and some days are super, honestly, they suck. But as long as you have God in your life, like you can do hard things. And so I love that verse. Like God is within her, she will not fall or fail. So it's written differently depending on which version you're looking at. But I love it. And so got it literally everywhere.
Yeah. I love that too. And just like you said, it's so simple. Another thing that's so simple is like, God is within her, she will not fail. And I actually was having a conversation with somebody yesterday just about like we think the wrong things are gonna bring us joy and make us so happy. But like you just said, like the ultimate goal is not to please man, it's to please God. And so it's like, honestly, if we just are striving to please God all the time, like we are gonna become so much more joyful and so much more loving. And it's so much simpler than this whole idea of like trying to do all these things, like be so successful. And it's like, why are we striving for things that aren't going to bring us joy in the end?
Yep. No, exactly. We are constantly looking for instant gratification and instant happiness and we think that we deserve to be happy all the time. But it's like another thing that really stuck out to me was we went on this field trip. I graduated from a very small Christian school in Bismarck, and we went on this field trip. I think it was 8th grade year. We went to Medora as a class. And Mr. K, he was just like, everybody loves Mr. K at Shiloh. And he was sharing with us this devotional before at the end of the day. And he's like, they talk about the difference between like happiness and joy. And they are two completely different things. Joy comes from the Lord and happiness is a feeling. And it's like, if you have God in your heart, like you have joy. Even if you're, even on your hard days, like you have that joy. However, happiness is not something that you just get. Like that's a feeling. So is sadness and anxiousness and all these different, and guilt, like all these things. But it's just separating those two. And I love that because it's so true. Like you, if God is within you and you have that faith, like you have joy, and it's different from happiness. And it doesn't mean that you're always going to be happy and joyful, but you constantly will have that joy and that thing to fall back on and to support you through the good things and the bad. And so
well, and I think like it's also so important to remember that you can like be successful and like have a great career and like have all these amazing things in your life, but like it's kind of just, I think it also ultimately boils down to like, who are you doing it for?
Oh yeah.
Are you doing it for like the success, for the fame, or are you doing it to praise the Lord? Like, who are you working for, kind of a thing. So I think like it's because it's hard because we talk about everything we just talked about in this whole episode, just about how, you know, like, okay, we need to, like, we're in this competitive society, we should just like do the little things, but honestly, like, it's okay to like have big dreams and like want to do these things. And I know you and I both, like, we really want to be successful and like do all these awesome things, but also we know that like praising the Lord is the number one thing. So I think it's like there is a fine line, but I think like doing things just like true and authentically, like for the Lord, everything that we do, in the end, like that's just the most amazing thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. And having like, it's so much more, at least to me, I found over my life, is that it's so much more about relationship than it is about religion. Like you can sit and you can study all these things and you can memorize all these verses, but if you're not really taking them to heart and you're not building that relationship with God, then it's not going to take you anywhere. Okay, I got to do this and this and this. And then I'm like, no, turn it into a prayer. Lord, help me, guide me through this and help me to do this. And all that kind of, and thank you for this. And, but it's hard. It's hard to find that and to remember that all the time and to keep him at the forefront of everything. Like even the most perfect Christians, none of us are perfect, but even a pastor or a priest, like they, you know, they're not doing that 100%, but it's that constant, like, okay, bring myself back to it. Like put God at the front, lean on him for understanding.
Yeah. I love it. You're so like so full of wisdom. And I think like this is such a great conversation. And I'm so thankful that we get to be here and just talk about this. And I'm just excited for you. And I know that, like I think we can all learn so much from you. So I'm just really thankful that you joined me today, because I think that, this is just so good. But we are going to wrap up. But Quinn, do you have any like last thoughts or any big takeaways that you're like, okay, everyone needs to know this? If you don't, that's okay. I'm putting you on the spot, but
no, you're totally good. I think one thing, we kind of talked a little bit about this over coffee with Kelsey too, but just like Christians there's like this idea around Christians that we're just like shove it down your throat, like wanna, you know, but it's like trying to separate that out from like, oh my gosh, all I want to do is like share the love of God with people. But also like, I don't want it to come off as, okay, this is what you need to do. Like, shove it down your throat. No, not at all. But it's like, you have people in your life that you know are struggling with accepting God or whatever it might be. Silently praying does more than you think it does. Like that's in God's hands. Like we, you know, it's not up to us to be like, this is what you should believe. This is how you do it. Like, again, going back to it is so much more about relationship over religion. And so what works for me, you know, I like to pray in my car. People may think that's weird. Maybe they don't like to do that. Like it's so different. And it's just like any friendship, like my friendship with person A is going to be different than her or his friendship with person B. Like, it's just different. All relationships are different depending on who you're in a relationship with. And obviously, like, all of our relationships with the Lord are going to look different, and we can't force that down anybody's throats. And that's never what my intention is. But I think as a person of faith, it again, going back to the word balance, but trying to find that balance between spreading God's word, but also not coming off in a way where it's like shoving it down people's throats and doing it in a way that kind of turns people off from wanting to pursue a relationship with God. Which is also why it's really important to try to surround yourself with God-fearing individuals, people who share those same values. And that doesn't mean that your only friends have to be people of faith like that, but I know for me personally, the people who I want closest to me in my closest circle, I want them to share that value. And there's people too, like, if you just share and you lead by example and you try to be the best that you can be, while also letting people know that, like, we all mess up, no matter if you have faith or not. We're all sinners. We're all going to make mistakes. So you can have the strongest relationship with God and you're still going to screw up at times. So,
yes.
But yeah, it's just, again, finding that balance between sharing God's word, but also letting people come to it by themselves too, and have that genuine connection with God and just praying those prayers.
Oh, so good. You're so good. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Quinn. I really appreciated this conversation. And I'm just so thankful for you. So
thanks, Grace. I really appreciate you asking me to come on this podcast. And I'm excited I need to go back and listen to the other ones because I want to hear what everybody else has to say too. So I love listening to podcasts. So I'll have to do that. But thank you so much for having me on here. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to just continuing conversations in the future.
I love it. Well, thank you.